As I'm sure you're all aware because you love reminding me every second of the day, I get a lot wrong on this channel, and because of that, I do like to highlight when I get something right, and when something that I talked about for a while ends up coming true. In today's video is a somewhat interesting one, maybe depending on your perspective, somewhat of a sad, disappointing one, about the iPhone 12 being a supercycle, and it seems to actually be happening. Let's begin. So Wedbush has been doing some analysis on supply chains and trying to calculate how good iPhone 12 sales have actually been. This is kind of important these days because Apple has decided to no longer tell us shipments of unit numbers. So what that basically means is Apple's never going to come forward and tell us how many units they shipped for the iPhone 12 or the iPad Pro or the Apple Watch or any of that stuff. It's all just going to be left to analysts and people that talk to supply chains and try to figure out demand by doing random sampling and that kind of thing. So this is all we really have to go off of, but Wedbush is saying they're expecting to see over 90 million iPhone shipments in the fourth quarter of this year, which is pretty crazy to imagine, and it sounds like there's also more reports suggesting that into 2021, Apple has ordered an increase in units that they've been shipping for the past few months by up to 30%, apparently. So that means that Apple is seeing more demand than they have inventory for, and they want to scale this demand. And if you recall, in years prior, there would oftentimes be Apple announcing a new iPhone and ramping up production and everything, and then going into 2021, you would see them scale back production a little bit. There were a lot of YouTube channels covering this when the iPhone 10 was scaled back a bit, and a lot of people saying, iPhone 10 is dead now, iPhone 10 isn't selling well, it's doomed, because apparently it wasn't selling quite as well as Apple was anticipating, even if that means one of the most popular iPhones in the world. I guess it's dead now, right? Well, now we're seeing the opposite of that problem. Apple can't make these iPhones fast enough, and there were several videos in the past year I made talking about how I think the iPhone 12 could be a super cycle. For those who don't know, that basically means just a larger influx of people upgrading in a single year than usual. And Wedbush is saying that they haven't seen this type of iPhone sales since the iPhone 6, which, if you're a long-term Apple fan and analyst, you're aware that the iPhone 6 was the best-selling iPhone of all time, arguably one of the best-selling products of all time. Just the first time Apple was able to go big with the screens and give a drastic new look to the iPhone lineup, there were a lot of people willing to upgrade that year. And of course, there were absolutely no issues with the iPhone 6 whatsoever. That's a joke, by the way. I'm aware. They bent for a lot of people. And it's interesting to me that the iPhone 12 is bringing out that number of people to upgrade again, but honestly, I can't say I didn't see it coming, because there are a lot of year-over-year changes, despite what the tech community may think. There's a lot of us that are following iPhone upgrades year after year and thinking iPhone 12 isn't that different, or this year I'm gonna skip, or I'm gonna wait for 120 hertz. All those reasons that the tech community has. Average consumer doesn't care about most of that stuff. All they see is newer looking iPhone with the squared off chassis. They got the thinner bezels with that OLED design on the cheaper iPhone 12 model, and of course now the 12 mini is a thing. And I'm also very impressed that despite all these other Android companies releasing phones all the time, Apple has some of the widest amount of range in their lineup between how small a phone can get and how big a phone can get that most companies don't pay much attention to. Most of the time it's like, 6 inches is portable enough. Everything else needs to be big. We want 7-inch smartphones. Apple actually provides a bit more diversity in that lineup, which I appreciate, and it seems like users are too. Wedbush is theorizing that 5G is one of the driving forces to get people to upgrade, which sadly I think they might have a point, but not for the reasons they're thinking. I know that it makes sense on paper, and it makes sense during earnings reports for Apple to be like, yeah, users and customers really want 5G, so that's why they're all upgrading. But personally, I don't think that's the reason. And if it is the reason, it's probably because they're getting scammed into thinking that if they buy a new iPhone, they're going to get way faster cellular speeds, and then they buy it and they don't, and then they don't want to go through the work of returning it because the new iPhone looks cooler, has neater features, and it's way better than their last iPhone. So they're like, the 5G part isn't that cool, but I like the phone anyway, so I'm going to keep using it. But honestly, I think there's a good chance this could be one of the last major super cycles with the iPhone lineup, because from here on out, I think it's honestly going to be really difficult for Apple to have another year that feels this major. I mean, between all new form factors, new display technologies, 5G, which they can brag about till the end of time, and sure, it is sad, but there are going to be a lot of people that fall for that trick into thinking, oh, my phone LTE speeds get slow sometimes, so I should buy new phone, make faster, right? Even though we're well aware that anybody who's experiencing slow LTE speeds speeds? Most likely is because they don't have great coverage where they are. So buying a 5G iPhone isn't going to suddenly make their coverage way better. And if you're like me, you know that there's a lot of circumstances where 5G actually performs worse than LTE. And that's a fact. I'm not saying all situations. I'm just saying there have been lots of reported cases of that happening. Either way, though, marketing wise, it's just gold because you get to go up on stage and say 4 gigabits a second. This is 10 times faster than your old phone, and people fall for that crap. But also, I think there's always something to be said about new design. You know, that just instantly can make older iPhones look dated, and the last big super cycle we got was when Apple switched from the squared off design on the 5S to the rounded off design of the iPhone 6. And Apple pretty much kept that rounded off design with an exception like the SE. For all these years, since 2014 until now, they're going back to the squared off look, and it's just kind of a fashion trend, right? It's just like, oh, actually, you know what? That looks pretty cool now. And I agree. I think it looks cool now too. I think it's a little more uncomfortable, but I think it's better for cases. And the other funny thing about this is the first time we've seen iPhones without the charge brick included, and yet we're seeing tremendously good sales. So if you guys were all upset and angry and saying Apple is doomed because they decided to not include a charge brick with the iPhone anymore, seems like average consumer doesn't really care because they're all still buying it. And like I predicted, there's probably a huge number of people that were like, oh no, there's no charge brick included, that sucks. Anyway, here we go, just gonna use my old charger. This does not help your argument if you think that that needs to be a pivotal included accessory, because we reward Apple with our purchases. You know, the things we say we like and the products we buy is kind of like voting in a sense and showing Apple, oh, this is what consumers care about, this is what consumers like. And we basically all proved to Apple just now that we're fine with no brick in the box, because sure, us YouTubers can complain about it all day and the tech community can tag at Tim Cook or tag at Apple that they suck now and Macs spelled backwards is scam, ha ha ha, we're so clever. But at the end of the day, money is what ultimately talks. And now Apple is seeing, oh, everybody's buying our phones and they don't seem to mind that there's no charge brick. And we shipped fast chargers with the Pro Series last year and they didn't sell as well as the iPhones are selling this year. So as backwards as that may sound, Apple is now realizing that when it comes to the average consumer, including the charge brick, doesn't matter. They don't care that much. Sure, they might be slightly upset, but it's not going to prevent them from buying it. And of course, I'm very curious to see how the whole lineup performs moving forward, because there's been a lot of reports lately that the 12 Pro Max is like the best seller and the 12 Mini isn't selling at all. Kind of bummed out by that. I wanted the 12 Mini to sell better, so if there's parts of this channel that you're like, Drew, you're not always right. I know, yeah, I'm well aware. I thought the 12 Mini would sell pretty well. Doesn't seem to be, but there's also some truth to the idea that people who are buying the new iPhone in the holiday period, buying it right as it's coming out for the pre-orders and everything, yeah, that's going to be more likely the tech-oriented person that's willing to spend $1,000 or $1,200 on their next iPhone. Whereas the 12 Mini and 12 probably cater to the more average mobile user that doesn't pre-order, doesn't upgrade every year. So in the long run, I think we will most likely see the 12 and 12 Mini start to outsell the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. But at least in the short term, that doesn't seem to be happening, and Apple was even surprised by how many people were willing to buy the 12 Pro, as was myself. I'm like, really? All you guys care about the telephoto lens this much? We're all just buying it? Okay, well, I don't think that's a good buy, but all right, you guys do you. I guess LiDAR is the next game-breaking feature. Maybe they should add a telephoto lens and LiDAR to the Apple Watch, and they'll see tremendous sales. But either way, iPhone 12 lineup seems to be selling really, really well, so congratulations, Apple. The $2 trillion company might just make it. And frankly, whenever there's a super cycle, it typically means we have a super-duper tiny cycle the following year. And because 2018 was supposed to be an S year, but we got the XR and XS Max, which made it more interesting, I think that 2021 is going to be one of the most boring iPhone upgrade years in a long, long time. Same footprints across the board, same iPhone lineup, same screen sizes, just with slight minor updates to the camera, maybe promotion over here, and hey, no charge port. Yay, let's all buy the new iPhone. Yeah, it's not going to be pretty, but in the short term, it's going to be pretty for Apple because they got tons of money pouring in and they can't build these things fast enough. So what do you guys think of the iPhone 12 actually being a super cycle? Feel free to let me know. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.